Welcome to the 9th episode of the It's Been Said podcast. I'm your host, SAI Executive Director Lisa Remy. Each show is dedicated to conversations on leadership as we further SAI's mission to support, encourage, and develop Iowa's educational leaders and learners. In this episode, you will hear from Dr. Chad Lang, Assistant Superintendent of School Improvement and Human Resources at Glenwood Community School District. Chad has recently been named the 2023 Central Office Administrator of the Year by the School Administrators of Iowa. Welcome, Chad. I'm so excited to have you on our show today.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to just get to spend some time having a conversation with you alone as a school leader in Iowa that I really look up to and have been inspired by. So this is just an honor for me as a learner alone, let alone to be on the podcast and be honored with this award. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and congratulations again. So that's very exciting.
It is. It's a great honor for our school district, and I feel like anything positive you can bring back to your local community is a representation of all those people around you. So pretty exciting.
Yeah. So, Chad, what is something that you would want everyone to know about you?
You know, I thought about this question. I have been thinking about this question. I could go any which direction. I think what I have settled on is something that I'd like to share is really how my leadership has changed once I was having the opportunity the last 4 years to spend some time looking at my Clifton strengths with an executive coach from a group in Omaha, Lori Stowe's Consulting, and they're Gallup trained certified executive coaches. And it's been an option, which I've been so blessed that our school board and our superintendent, Devin Embray, have said, anybody on our leadership team that wants an executive coach and access and some time, you're welcome to have that. It's not, and I think what that has been able to do is a couple of things. One, it's allowed me to model growth mindset with our staff, and that, you know, when you are being coached, and it's particularly important for me that oversees our TLC program, when you're being coached, that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. We all need a coach, and I'm a big Marshall Goldsmith fan, and one of the top executive coaches in the world. And so just having that opportunity and exposure to working with them, and the baseline, long story short, the baseline of working with them is obviously doing an updated Clifton Strengths assessment. And I think what someone should know about me as I've worked through those strengths is that everyone has builders and barriers associated with their strengths. And my top 5 strengths are learner, achiever, activator, ideation, and maximizer. So what everyone should know about me is that can be a Molotov cocktail of leadership. And so you really need to know, you know, how I might show up in a room can be both a builder or a barrier to you. And so I think just knowing that about a person is important. You don't need to know all the, you know, descriptors of what all of those mean according to Clifton. But I think if you just think about that, how people show up in a room is very important, or even in a conversation, because they're just leaning into the builder part of their strengths. But although I feel like, you know, I have recognized the barriers of those strengths, and it's helped me become a great reflector of my leadership skills. And so it's probably important that you know some concoction of those 5 when I'm invited to be a part of things, I guess.
Well, Chad, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate knowing that you have worked with an executive coach. I too agree how important that is to be a learner, to model that learning. We're actually thinking here at SAI, how might we bring coaching out to our members? Not sure where we're going yet, but thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah. I think that vulnerability is very important, and that we're learning all together at different stages in our career, but also around, you know, how our particular attributes can be best utilized and evolve in the circumstances of school leadership.
Yeah, for sure. So as you think about education today, what, in your opinion, is the most exciting thing that's happening?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that can be identified as problematic or concerning, but I think when I talk about exciting and being, you know, on the pulse of education from a curriculum and instruction standpoint, more than anything at a leadership standpoint, is the fact that a lot of the flaws associated with the industrial model of schooling are really being exposed. And whether that's grading and communicating, whether that's our curriculum deployment, whether that's SEL and the leadership components of education, or those employability skills, the problem solving, the STEAM, the STEM, I think from a lot of different avenues, that industrial model that just sort of pushes people through 13 years of education, and really worked for 100 years. I mean, it sort of created this cream of the crop. We sent them off to higher ed. They became the executives and owners of business and industry, and everybody else was able to really survive, and get a good job, and work either in agriculture or in industry and actually provide a great living. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that if you kind of just pump through the system, and you don't have some minimum competencies in our curriculums over 13 years, it's going to be a difficult life for you to be able to provide for a family economically. I think our economy's really changed. And I think that schools have not waited around to adapt. And whether that's at a local level, or that's at a national level, or even at state levels, whether that's through graduation requirements, through exposure to career and technical education, just the orientation of our school day and how it might look. It's exciting, the fact that K-12 education is not lagging so far behind in the realities of our economy. We're really an attention economy. So, what keeps our attention and our motivation, and that gig and that service element requires massively faster agility and adaptation in our K-12 education. It isn't that the fundamentals of our curriculums aren't essential, but it's having the ability to adapt and meet the needs of what those people tend to call the real world phenomenon. In the real world, ... So it's kind of exciting to, not everybody, and it's certainly not co-equal across the state of Iowa. But the fact that where schools can, there's just exciting ideas about how we're evolving and adapting to prepare our students for success beyond our doors. I think that's been something we should continue to celebrate.
Yeah. So when you think about that, and that adapting that schools need to do, I think about technology and how technology has in some ways impacted classrooms, and maybe in some cases should impact classrooms more. So what are your thoughts on technology in the classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, oftentimes in the HR part of things, I'll ask this question to candidates, and typically a great response that I get is that it should be a tool, a resource, shouldn't replace. It shouldn't be a toy. We don't want students in front of screens all day long. And these are all great answers. I don't disagree with them. And obviously this year, AI has really come to the forefront with ChatGPT and others. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I think the role of technology should be, do we have the ability to instruct how to use technology to be more efficient and effective in our ability to communicate what we can know or do? Because that's really the end game, and all of what we're trying to prepare students to do. In the consuming of the information, they're pretty good at. They figure out ways to solve problems. If something's broken at home and you ask your teenager, how would you figure out how to fix the handle on the dishwasher? They'll figure that out. Content is really, not commoditized anymore. You can find content on YouTube anywhere you want, but the question is how then do you use technology, if at all, to then translate, okay, great, I saw that you found the ability to fix our dishwasher handle, but it says you need to go find the screwdriver and you don't know how to do that. Okay, so then how do you communicate that need, or how do you collaborate with your parents or your brother and sister on how to solve that problem? And so it's like, the consumption, the access to the information is quick and vast as ever, even with AI. If AI said, here are the top 10 steps from ChatGPT on how to fix your dishwasher, you actually have to be able to implement those steps and then know where to go and communicate with others and problem solve and all those types of things. And so I'm not so much worried about whether teachers are going to be replaced, because that human element, that connection piece, is so valuable and important. I think when we get in problems in education, when we think about replacing,
right,
replacement. And so it has to be like, are we ignoring the element of efficiency and effectiveness? I've been really excited on the curriculum and assessment side for us, how much we're going to offer a teacher session here in Glenwood this summer on AI for effective classroom teachers. And just, how to unpack a standard more quickly, how to cross-reference a social studies standard with an ELA standard using AI. That's pretty important. I typically have had to take a half a day, sub out the teams, get them together, figure out how to get their PLCs together. And we can probably do that through email now and say, here's what a recommendation from ChatGPT came. What do you guys think? And really work through that. And they're so much more efficient. In the day and age of retaining teachers, trying to find ways to make their lives more effective and efficient is important. So the technology in the classroom is not just for the students, but also the ability for the educators to become more efficient and effective with their time, find maybe a little better work-life balance as well. But we gotta backfill that with our ability to communicate, problem solve. And so it's a complementary nature, and it's ever evolving, of course. So that's what I would say about technology in the classroom.
Yeah, I really, again, appreciate your response there, and the idea of how we embrace technology and what technology can do for us, and then yet what skills students need, even staff and students, but I'm thinking about our students that we serve in Iowa, skills that they need so that they can discern, the technology piece, but then also how to, all those other skills that you talked about, problem solving, collaborating, critically thinking, how important those are along with the technology, for sure.
Indeed.
So I know as one of your responsibilities is curriculum instruction and assessment. And so you think about students in the classroom and what success might look like. So what have you defined there at Glenwood, or what does success look like to you in the classroom?
Well, pretty simply put, you can't hit what you can't see. So if we don't have clearly identified learning targets, then we need to make sure that we do. We call those outcomes, and the sub-targets underneath those components. We have over 199 curriculums that are actively being taught in our K-12 experience, PK-12, excuse me. And so it really starts with, do we have a great identification of what the learning priority, standard, target, component, whatever you want to call it, looks like? And then more almost like 1A to that is, have we developed a commonly defined definition of proficiency? And do the students know what that looks like? Okay, so it's great that you understand the target. I'm on the basketball floor. I see that there's 2 hoops. I understand they're both 10 feet, and I understand we're going towards that one. That's great. So that's clear now. So what would proficiency look like for our team? Would we score 100 points? Would we score 80 points? Would we pass it 10 times? And we actually delineate what that looks like, and to use that analogy into the classroom. What level of complexity? How much, I hate to use the word rigor, but what's the level of conceptual complexity at 3rd grade versus 8th grade versus 12th grade on inferring, for example? And then we really try to hone in on that proficiency, and we measure the percentage of students, which hopefully is 100% at proficiency, but also their growth towards that. Particularly for our students that get lost in labels, I think it's really important that we have the ability to show our progress towards proficiency. For us, we use proficiency scales. Really, they're learning progressions, frankly. For all my grading assessment gurus out there that will say, you're not using proficiency scales, you're actually using learning progressions. And so there is some semantics difference, but having that lined out for our students and parents, and then really utilizing that to track our own learning, one of those Hattie concepts for high effectiveness, is super important to us. And so our students should be able to identify where they are along a progression of learning at all levels. And then also just being able to clearly articulate what that looks like to be proficient or even exceptional beyond that is we're really trying to work on that exceptional piece. So that's not just in the ether, actually identifying what that actually would look like. And a lot of that's sort of leaning into that cross-content application, synthesizing to new and novel concepts that we've taught, but perhaps problems that don't come out of a 1 through 31 odd.
Yeah. So when you think about what you were just sharing, Chad, and then how students learn or even staff, right, adults, talk to our listeners about how people learn or how students learn in relation to also what you're talking about, success in that classroom. Yeah.
So the ability for us to be able to unpack, and that's really important, to use that backwards design philosophy and progress from Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe, and really unpack it, and then utilizing formative assessment is much so for us to obviously intervene along the way, but is equally as important to define wins for our students. It feels like most of our teachers, even today, and certainly our administrators, were so concept driven, in that everything about learning of a unit was unit based or chapter based and sort of thrown into a bucket. And it didn't really get differentiated out. There wasn't a chance of succeeding. If it was graphing linear equalities, there weren't levels, and there were levels of ability to know how to see a progression towards, it was sort of an all or nothing proposition. I think what that's done, or what that could do, is really stifle some motivation for proficiency early on in a child's career when they're really just developing in the skills. And so by sort of parsing that out, setting mini targets, identifying opportunities to find more success. And I don't want anyone to confuse that with a trophy for everyone sort of mentality. That's just simply not true at all. There's really nothing that you earned or been given, but the opportunity to sort of segment and build a progression to find and identify success, not to get access to proficient or exceptional type synthesis or problem solving, but actually to be able to find wins, build confidence in our student, and then tighten a feedback loop of where they are in their learning. Whether any of us want to admit to it or not, where we've grown the most improving as an adult or as a child is where we got constant feedback loops, and really were we in a position to receive it. And as someone who's tried to teach their spouse how to play golf, I know full well whether someone's in a position to receive the feedback. But if you really want to learn and grow, you got to tighten those feedback. And we've been influenced a lot by Tom Guskey's work, and really he was a graduate assistant for Benjamin Bloom. And so there's just tighter formative loops on feedback, a lot more on learning, a lot less on earning in terms of compliance and just turning things in. And so that's a mind shift. It goes along with our grading, of course, but just getting that continuous feedback loop so that students are sensing where they are, and then you can make those mid-course corrections so much more quickly. That leads to more differentiation, a little bit different in terms of designing what our day-to-day classroom looks like.
As I listen to you here this morning, I'm not at all surprised why you were selected as the Central Office Administrator of the Year. So,
well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Like I said, I've been surrounded by some awesome people, not only at Glenwood, but in my career, and that's important. And anyone that knows anything about leadership can name those 5 people in your foxhole that would have your back, that got you where you are. And I've obviously been influenced just like people like yourself. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So in that application, you talked a little bit about how you are currently working alongside your superintendent to add career-centered offerings for students there at Glenwood, and talk to our listeners about why you're building this model. What areas do you hope to have as part of this career center?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's been sort of a back and forth affair. We're calling it our Innovation Center. One of our neighboring districts, a really small district as it goes in Iowa, East Mills, has a career center a traditional, what we would call a blue collar career center that they've got off the ground, or they're going to have off the ground in the fall. And, if you don't know where Glenwood is, we're just a little bit farther west and close to the Missouri River. And we are a bedroom community to Omaha, Nebraska. And there's a lot of great industry and tech industry in the community. And we just thought, what a missing opportunity for our students to not find ways to expose them to careers that, obviously, you've heard the adage, there's all kinds of percentages. How many percentages of jobs don't exist that they'll be, we don't even know. You could throw it around. I've heard 40%, 50% in the next 10 years haven't even been created. I can't do anything about that, but what I could do is what I anecdotally notice as I work through curriculum with students, or I have conversations with them, is the age-old question: when will I ever need this stuff? And it becomes harder and more difficult for teachers in a secondary environment to actually answer that question, because they don't know what most careers look like. They've been a teacher their whole life. So they don't know actually what people do at PayPal. They really don't understand what people might do in a marketing firm, or they have a general concept of that. And so, Devin and I took a visit to Clarkson College. There's a small nursing school in Omaha, and they invited us to come over. Like, we just want to show you what we do here. And we were so inspired by that visit that we thought, wow, I didn't know there was 3D imaging of heart valves, that's actually a job, and that the surgeon would practice on the 3D imaging that you would create as the assistant. And so they wouldn't have to, go into a new tumor blind for an infant or something like that. And that was just so inspiring. And we thought, and we asked again, what kind of certification, what kind of learning would you need to do that? And it just didn't match what we saw in schools. It was like, in schools, there's like, okay, you got to go get your CNA, and then you have to be an RN. And then there was all these gateways, which are perfectly fine gateways to employment, to get to 3D imaging, to get to that specialization. But when we really unpacked the curriculum, It was really the technical part of it was you had a high school diploma, you understood anatomy and physiology, and you knew how to input an MRI and a CT scan and make an image out of that. And then, of course, run a 3D printer. Like you have to know how to make the tumor orange and the heart blue or whatever the surgeon wanted. But it's like, wow, I don't think anyone knows that's a job. And so we just really started talking with our board, talking with our community about, we have some space opportunity with the GRC closing on our campus, and we can potentially get some space to actually have an innovation center where we would be able to offer a few strands in AM or PM type environments to expose students in Southwest Iowa. And obviously try to work and collaborate with Iowa Western Community College. And Dr. Kenny's been great on us kicking the tires on some things, because a lot of the pathways we're considering, they don't have a pathway through an AA or an AS program. It just doesn't exist. And so we started really abstract, and then we looked at some grants that were out there through Iowa and in the USA nationally. And some of our pathways were so innovative, like we were thinking about financial technology and cryptocurrency, and how could students be exposed to an AM PM 1-year program that doesn't commit half of their high school experience and they lose out on electives, but also gets them enough exposed to say, I could do this. Like this is interesting to me. In that it provided a generalist experience that it's like, I did that for a year. I was really interested in financial technology. I could even help maybe set up a QR scanner at my mom's business. But I think I want to go to Iowa State and major in marketing. But that exposure, what we believe is that exposure, A, could inspire them into a field, but B, could actually enhance them if they become in marketing later on. You never know what helped you. It's kind of like me, when I was a custodian, like at a department store in high school, it sure helped me out. I thought, I'll never use these skills, but it sure helped me out when I realized I was an assistant principal and our custodians were really just being neglected and taken for granted that I sure as heck didn't do that. And all those things we learn has application later in our life. So we should never dismiss what could be inspiring or make a difference for us. And so taking all that information together, we started working with a parent group, started talking about pathways, looked at grants and what would complement East Mills, and could we get in a exchange agreement with them, and we would send kids to them. And we have about 9 neighboring school districts that have some interest in getting this off the ground. And we're looking at industrial robotics. We have a huge cattle manufacturer being built that will be state-of-the-art technology in terms of the robotics, coming actually from Norway, I think. It's a fish processing robotics that'll be used on cattle. It's never been done in America yet, and that's going to be just 6 miles up the road. So trying to partner with them. We were looking at precision agriculture and GPS, a lot of drone technology. We have a great John Deere dealership in our community, and we want to partner with them. And of course, having a civil pathway, we'll talk about this later, but having a grow your own teacher program. We'd love to get fire science involved. And so we have different levels of exposure. And we're hoping that, another year of us doing some grant writing, doing some work. It's been difficult because you run up against, with innovative pathways, you run up against BOE certification.
Right.
And then if you're like, okay, we're going to go outside of BOE certification and look through the community college route, the salary of the individuals coming from the private sector to actually teach innovative pathways is so incomparable that it would have to be someone's philanthropic effort to say, I'm going to go teach high schoolers for, whatever the salary might be. So there's a lot of challenges and road bumps along the way. We've had an awesome visit at Sioux City Career Academy. They've been great partners. We've been to Kansas City. We need to get over to Omaha's Metro. Their OPS has a great program as well. So we're trying to make it our own, but that's really the genesis of all of that and how that's come together. And it's not fun for someone like me who would like to continue to make progress every week. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 emails later, 2 months later, you're trying to connect with, it's one of those weird things where you're really working with private industry a lot, and they just operate at a different speed sometimes than what we can, and have different parameters that we have that they don't. So that's what our innovation center idea is.
Yeah, what great opportunities you're trying to bring to Glenwood students or Southwest Iowa students. So that's fantastic. Yeah, and that collaboration with other districts is in innovative thinking as well, right? So how can you collaborate and bring this to more kids?
Absolutely.
So when you think about teaching and learning, what do you hope teaching and learning looks like in your district And then how, as you know, that's your curriculum instruction and assessment, right? Then how do you communicate that vision to your staff?
Well, it's always a challenge because of, number one, just onboarding. I think one thing that we really take for granted, and you could say what you want about districts' retention rates and how they varied. I mean, if you just talked about replacing baby boomers alone, which is a huge demographic in any employment sector, you're talking about replacing 10 to 12% of your staff. And when you have so many systems and processes to be aligned, and that's my word here to answer this question, is my hope is that we are aligned in our vision and our deployment. We can teach a lot of things, but we can't measure everything. And so, we really want to put ourselves in a position to say we're aligned, that our students could, and I've been in this position, and not in a negative way, but to raise their hand and say, which outcome or component does this lab go to? I would hope we get to a point where they would recognize that themselves. Oh, I understand why we're trying to split the root base off of this tree in our plant science class, because we're trying to see X. But at the very least, I would hope that every student would understand the alignment of all the learning activities and instruction as it relates to targets. That's the goal. Now, we teach students all kinds of things: how to be respectful, why it's important to be kind when we're speaking and listening. What does an active listener look like? Some of those things are addressed through capturing kids' hearts, or PBIS, or SEL endeavors. And so, but when it comes to teaching and learning, I really hope that our staff have a great vision of the alignment from our outcomes components to our target level, which allows us to intervene and be very specific. You all that are listening to this podcast, and of course you guys on the call, know that people want schools to do a lot of things. They ought to be able to, right? Whether that's handwriting, or give a presentation, or write a friendly letter. There's a lot of things that people want schools to do, and none of them are rarely are they ever bad ideas, but you have to prioritize. And you have to have the ability to prioritize on learning outcomes that will be cross-leveraged into lots of different areas. And our staff have done a wonderful job of doing that in Glenwood. I'm super proud of their efforts. We've used really the same curriculum framework in terms of unpacking and unwrapping our standards into curriculum and then into assessments, all in-house. We've used the same framework out of Emporia, Kansas for I think 13 years now. And I think it's just been really critical in aligning us. And so, yes, we get the curveballs like everybody else does. Computer science curriculum standards come into play. And so then we utilize our framework to really think about how we could leverage those standards to enhance the current curriculums we already have and be cognizant of it. And so those are the days that the instructional coaches and I really put our heads together and try to think about a way we can continue to be aligned. We don't want anything to be one-offs or randoms. For me, if anything's one-off, I hope it's a soft skill. Like, hey guys, we got to stop. Can we just talk about how to be respectful in the hallway? Like, that would be okay with me, because that's what we would expect our children are getting exposed to in our schools. But when it comes to the actual teaching and learning vision, I hope really that we're aligned. It's important to me.
Yeah. So Chad, I'll dig in a little bit to you personally. What's one of the most creative things you've ever done?
My wife will kill me for this, because she's like, that doesn't sound creative at all. We have completely different strengths. But, having the opportunity to write a book from scratch with Matt Townsley, who's an assistant professor at Northern Iowa in school leadership. Many of you know Matt. We've spent the last 16 months writing a book called Parents Guide to Grading and Reporting, being clear about what matters. And we built that obviously from the ground up. And it's just been such a joy to do. One, to get to work with Matt and make me so much smarter and help me become a better reflective thinker and how I am able to communicate. But just the creative juices back and forth, it's been 16 months, and Matt and I have met in person one time. In Des Moines, where it worked out. I was at something and he could come down and whatever. And so how cool to have Google Docs to write a book. And we've talked on the phone and Zoomed frequently, and because I do all this on my own time outside of working at Glenwood. it's just been such a creative outlet to make it your own and to not, and we wrote the book without a publisher in mind. And then since pitched and were accepted by Roman and Littlefield, and it'll be coming out in September. And it's just been so fun to take our basically 40 years of experience in grading and assessment between the two of us and try to fill in the gaps where we feel like, and Iowa has a great reputation for grading and assessment reform, and it's really get at that parent level, because these are our folks that need the most context around grading and assessment change and reform. And so we're trying to really, in a way, kind of in a dissertation, mentality is, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Well, and so we've written a book that's parent friendly. And of course, the challenge in working with Matt and I is that, we have to be able to take all the thoughts and training and expertise we have, and he's got a way more than I do about grading and assessment, and then really write that at a level that makes sense to a lay person. And that isn't attacking traditional grading, that isn't trying to sell you on standards-based grading, but really to look at what it means and how it relates to preparing kids for success in the 21st century. We talk a little bit about the standards-based movement with No Child Left Behind and how we kind of got to standards. We lay that framework, and then we also give really practical tips at the end of every chapter for parents. What are some things I should ask my child about learning instead of earning all the time? And what are some questions I could ask our teachers? And we use that from our experience, as both Matt and I were teachers. So that's been incredibly fun and rewarding and challenging. And it's about to get a lot more challenging because we're probably going to get all of our copy edits back from some super duper smart editor and find out how poor our grammar is at times. But it's been incredibly creative because it wasn't a project where someone said, here's the parameters. You need to stay within these bounds. We made it 7 by 10. We decided to have parent questions at the end. We put the amount of chapters in that we wanted. And so, like I said, somebody like my wife would say, I can't believe you said that's the most creative thing that you've ever done. But to really think about having full autonomy to do a project and to say, this is how we would do it. If we were a parent, this is what we would want. And we really worked hard to solicit parent advice throughout the nation, parents that had, and talk about a difficult challenge is getting input from parents that aren't educators between our networks. It's like, I don't know a lot of parents who aren't teachers. So I'm really working through that. We had parents from Pennsylvania, California, so that we had a very good cross representation of what their thoughts were. And we actually ran a really early draft of the book on our own dime and sent it out to them. And also experts like people that work for Jim Knight and Ann Hoffman, who's from Cedar Rapids, gave us a great run through. She sent me like tabs and tabs and tabs of information and was so gracious with her comments. That's been so rewarding. It sounds like a humble brag, but it's really not. It's just been fun. If it never ever got read by anybody, it was awesome to have that experience. Because a lot of what we do in management mode of our job is, I need to get this report done to get it submitted to Ed Portal and have it done, right? And this project's not like that. It's way slower. You might write for 2 hours and Matt might cross all that out. And it's just a back and forth in that proficiency over time. The ability to reflect and slow down leads to such a higher quality. And we just live in this fast pace, get it done. And it was one area in my life where, just the process made me slow down and be more reflective, in particular with words on a written piece of paper, but also just the ideas and things that we're sharing. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think it's definitely creative, and I look forward to picking up a copy come September. So we all know how important leadership is in schools. How do you build leadership in your district?
Well, I think you've got to distribute leadership as much as possible. Iowa has a wonderful framework within the TLC framework to do that. And as creative as you can be with that is just been wonderful. I taught in Dubuque right out of UNI as a teacher. And then I was in Kansas City and in Missouri for 13 years. So I didn't even know what TLC was. And when I came back to Iowa 4 years ago and then I had to oversee a program, I had some learning to do because Missouri doesn't have anything like that. If you have an instructional coach in your building, you are a wealthy district because you've chose to have one less classroom teacher to do that financially. So we didn't have a lot of experience with that in Missouri. And so just understanding the role of teacher leadership and how you could distribute leadership through the TLC has been a great joy for me. in this role, and just seeing the capacity of what those positions can be. I'm a big believer in Daniel Pink's work about intrinsic motivation 2.0 and all of his stuff there from Drive. And what I believe is important is that, our value within the organization is our ability to feel confident in the work that we do. And in order to feel confident in the work that we do, you have to feel competent about things. And so any opportunity we have in Glenwood, and this really comes from Devin, our superintendent is a great role model in this, is getting people to be competent in things that can make a difference in their colleagues and peers, ultimately leading to better student achievement for our students, is just been a great capacity driver for us. We have a second-year teacher who is going to be published in the Indiana Literacy Journal in the spring. We have coaches who are presenting at the Iowa ASCD conference on their instructional round strategy and how they do all that district-wide. We've got people going, high school teachers going to kindergarten classrooms and all those kinds of things. And what has allowed them to do that is we've really pushed it to the degree they want to develop their own capacity to lead to more competency and more things around leadership, particularly coaching and instruction, assessment, pedagogy, and then develop that localized competency so that they're really confident in their value in our organization, and really try to flatten out our organization. It was really tempting to me in my first year in this role to be everything to everybody. And, while some people would say things like, man, it's so great to have you here. I've never had a central office leader that would sit down and write an assessment with me. On the other hand, I think there were people that said, oh my gosh, we have to have another meeting with that guy on the third floor in the yellow room to write assessments. And so realizing that, just sort of reorganizing our TLC program with our committee to say, we have got to continue to develop competency, and particularly in our district with our instructional coaches being full-time out of the classroom, they deserve all the credit. They've done just a phenomenal job. So really increasing the capacity and competency of many, many people. We have 26% of our staff in a role of some kind. And it's not just putting someone in a teacher leadership role, and then it's supporting them with the professional learning they need. So another team of ours that are 100% classroom teachers, but carry a role outside of that would be technology integration teacher leaders. They're basically our pilots. If something cool comes out, which it does every day, that's going to lead to a PO for me someday. That's the joke in the equation. They pilot it first, and they get really good, honest feedback, and teachers in their building know we can go to them. We don't have to have another thing put upon us by central office or our principal, and we're really going to have someone on the ground who looks like me, sounds like me, and has parents like I do or whatever to actually utilize and implement. And the same thing's true with some other TLC positions we have. So that's been very, very successful.
Yeah. So staying on the topic of teachers, we all know how important it is to have quality teachers in the classroom. Tell our listeners about the hashtag, the RAM way, and your hiring manual.
Oh, I'd love to talk about this. Again, great credit to Devin. 4 years ago, about 3 years ago, during the pandemic, we knew that hiring was going to continue to be a challenge. We didn't know to the extent that it would be today. And we didn't have an HR director in our district. It just, the way the size of our district was, and maybe some budget cuts in years past, it just didn't happen. And so all of that really fell upon the building principals. And I happened to be taking a course or two at Drake just to get my Missouri licensure for a superintendent licensure. And I noticed that DT McGee, who's at Norwalk, many of you know, was teaching an HR class. And I'm like, Devin, I should take that class, and maybe I can help with our HR strategy in terms of making sure that, we're looking forward at hiring the exact type of teachers we need to do the things that we want to do here. And he's like, absolutely, we can do that. And I got in that class, and DT was so awesome. He shared so many of the great strategies he's used over the years. And we read a book called Agile Leadership, or Agile Hiring Practices. And that really changed my line of thinking of what we were doing. And most schools are pretty antiquated in terms of their strategies and practices. We're really way too slow. We're not agile enough to meet the market. And so thankfully, the board and Devin advocated to add HR director really to my role as assistant superintendent, particularly on the certified side from a recruitment and retention standpoint. And then I worked to develop a new framework and hiring lens for our district, and put together a manual for our principals to really understand, and had some great conversations with our hiring managers, which are principals and directors. And really, it came down to doing some research with HumanX out of Lincoln, Nebraska, in their style profile, and understanding, consistent, successful teachers over time have these characteristics. And then just utilizing our own experience of what we think teachers need to be able to have to be successful here, and boiling down to 4 C's. And I just did that because I need that to remember that. And here's what they are. When we make sure that when we're looking for people to hire teachers to our district and administrators, they absolutely have to personify these 4 C's for them to be successful. No particular order, although I could put them in order if someone wanted me to. But most importantly, you've got to have high character to work around our students. I can't teach you character. That's something you've got to be able to have. We send our kids every day, thousands of them, to be with you all day long. Your character can't be in question. Number 2, are you coachable? We have this whole TLC framework for coaching teachers. If you're going to have blinders down and say, I've been doing this a long time, I don't need to be coached, you're not going to be a great teacher for us, because you're not going to fit into 2 hours of PLC every Wednesday. The big part, like Chad Dumas always says, don't ever forget about the fact that PLC, learning is a big part of that PLC, is that we would be learning from each other. And so you got to be of that coachable mind, or I always think of like being a catcher's position. Like, are you ready for this? And then of course, being a collaborator goes right along with being coachable. Are you willing to collaborate? Are 2 heads better than 1? Or am I kind of a sage on the stage? I feel like I got this. I don't really need to share my expertise with you. And that helps obviously within our PLC framework as well. And then lastly, are you competent in being able to do what we're asking you to do? Are you willing to be able to be? What's your ceiling? I really like Brad Black at HumanX, that always he shared a pie chart with me, and he's like, man, hiring is 50% talent. Half of that pie chart has to be talent. And so many people put so much more onus on fit. But then you're ignoring the fact that what is their talent ceiling? They have a propensity to be trained. And I think we could learn from the private sector really well in that area. And so we put those 4 C's together: coachable, collaborator, character, and competency. And those things sound really simple, but as Admiral McCraven says in his new book, The Wisdom of a Bullfrog, they're simple, but they're not easy. And so just because they're simple in concept doesn't mean that they're easy to be able to do all of those. And so what we've done through our manual is we've set up a system that works for us, that I can actually pull off with some great administrative assistance. We collect applications just like everybody else, probably on some sort of online platform. And then if they meet all the requirements and there aren't any legal, issues with their application, I schedule them for a 30-minute phone interview with me, every single teacher candidate that's viable. And I just work them into my schedule, whether that's at night, in the evening, whatever works for me. I personally do that for our district of our size. I can do that. And I use 17 questions that I've developed that hit all 4 of those C's. And they're standard from K-12 vocal music to preschool teacher. And we have standard look fors for all those so that we can build a little bit of a profile. And I always tell them, this isn't an interview. It's just an opportunity to understand where your strengths lie within these 4 C areas that we value. And I tell candidates, these are the things we value. And I learned that from Trent Grunmeyer. Just tell people what you're looking for. I think that's really important. And so I do that a lot at college campuses when I'm recruiting and so on. Then what we do is if we feel like, hey, listen, they hit most of the marks, this is where the agility comes in. We use a platform called Spark Hire. I send out 7 questions that are like a pre-start to the interview. So it's 7 more questions that are similar to those 4 C's that hit on 4 of those C's. They always end with why Glenwood, why now? Why do you want to be a part of our organization? And then that gives me the ability to have a video that I can share with our hiring team. And that is always going to involve our administration of that building, or the hiring manager, myself, and probably some member of that PLC. And we keep that group tight so that we can be agile and turn. As you can imagine, trying to get 10 people together on an interview committee for a 2nd grade teacher is impossible, with children and ball games and all those kinds of things. And that was a change for our folks. Some of them were like, I've always been a part of the team, or the whole grade level team should be there. And so that there were some learning pains there. We always had them teach a lesson. And the first candidate, I'll tell a story about this. The first candidate we utilized that process for was a middle school English language arts teacher that we actually recruited at Iowa State. and he had 4 interviews in one week, and one of them was ours. And I think it was like on a Tuesday, and we utilized this process and it worked really well. And we talked as a team, should we offer him? And I always had the hiring manager make the call, not me, because they're the direct supervisors. They're going to be working with them. And they called, and he had offers from all 4 by Friday. I mean, us being the 4th. And it was so eye-opening to our team. Like, they had no idea that was the reality. And that was in 2020. And of course, now it's like that all the time. So the ability to bring agility to that process, we can run that whole process in a 5-day frame. So like, I had a candidate pop in this morning. I checked multiple times per day. I'm starting, once they hit complete and I confirm this is all accurate about me, I'm starting to set up that 30-minute phone call. And then, obviously there's reference checks and things like that, and background checks and all that as well. But just bringing agility to it, that we're rolling all the time. And if we're not, someone's offering. So we just need to put ourselves in a position, but not also being leveraged to fill spots, which I think is not something we should ever want to do in education. We're not the type of organization that should be settling for our kids.
Agreed. We know how important that
I
teacher
hope that
is.
answers your question.
It does. And I think you've kind of moved into the next question about your agile process.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, and maybe you don't feel like there's more to add, but the retention part of it? So you've talked a lot about the recruiting and the hiring process. What about the retention side of that, Chad?
We've got to continue to do better. We've now done a Gallup engagement survey 2 years in a row with all of our teachers. And we know that engagement is critically important when it comes to retention. I think we have done a wonderful job in trying to take that model that we've done for our TLC teachers and expand it to give lots of opportunities for our teachers to grow and feel competent in the work that they do. Because if you're like me, when I was a high school social studies teacher, I felt competent because I knew a lot about American history and government. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know anything about SEL or, Piaget stages were long gone. Sorry, you and I, but hadn't really used them. And I thought, because who were my models for great social studies teachers? Whoever the people I had at Lamar's High School in the late 90s. And they were awesome people, but I liked history. I don't know about everybody else. I don't think they were as engaged. We watched a lot of movies and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, in turning around, I thought to be a really good teacher, I had to know a lot and tell a lot of stories. And that really resonated with some of our students, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But it probably didn't resonate with a whole lot of them. And so just understanding that there's a lot more to this job than what it takes. And if I put all my eggs in my basket about being a competent teacher only in knowing the content, I was missing my students entirely. Wasn't building good relationships. I was writing off groups of kids. And I think thinking about our ability to retain staff means they've got to be able to be competent in a lot of different things that maybe they didn't originally sign up for. And that's hard. I think thinking about all the work we do around SEL and trauma-informed practices, that's a lot to take on as a teacher. And just being in a space where I have 150 kids a day or 130 students a day, coming from so many different backgrounds and needs and desires, on top of trying to be a great science teacher, that's unbelievable. So we just try to think about, have lots of different on-ramps for teachers to grow and learn at their rate, or none at all, particularly in the summer or through our coaching, which is entirely optional. We've had some great engagement rates in our coaching model that is entirely optional. In 2 different buildings, we had 88% and 90% of all of our teachers in those buildings be involved in an instructional round, a POP, a parallel lesson, come tape me. I want to see, that's something to really be proud of. And I think just creating different on-ramps. I know when I came here, the gym night and impact cycle, the deep impact cycle was something that, was really being popularized around the country. And it's great, but it's not an on-ramp, it's a ramp. Like, you're not slowly getting into a coaching cycle or going on one visit and coming back to your class for an hour. It's intimidating. And so we decided as a team, we've got to have lots of on-ramps so that people feel very competent to the degree that they want to. And so I'm excited about our summer academies we launched yesterday. We have 8 different summer academies, 1 day, 2 days, some taught in-house. Some people like Todd Whitaker coming to our district and doing some classroom management. And being able to compensate those teachers for those days and honoring their time, or they don't have to come to anything if they don't want to. That truly a la carte, localized method. They're not jumping on a plane. They really can come here. And that's all based off surveys of things they wanted to know more about. So our sessions on AI, our sessions on Kagan, our sessions on a book study, Make It Stick. Those are all things our teachers wanted. So we just built a model through our TQPD committee and we offered it. And so that got launched yesterday. So I'm excited about that. And I think that helps feel supported. I think we need to continue to do a good job in retention and figure out what it is it means for our teachers to be engaged in our work. And it's a challenge because it's hard.
Yeah, right. It is hard, which I think impacts the teacher shortage that we're seeing, right? It's real for Iowa school districts.
It is.
My understanding, again, through your application, that you've developed a couple programs to help with that at Glenwood, the RAM Aspiring Educators Program and the RAM C2C program. So share a little bit about each of those programs with our listeners.
Yeah, of course. I mentioned earlier that one of our strands of our innovation center would be a civil strand. There would be some civil routes. And of course, one of the first and most important ones to get off the ground would be our RAY program, our RAM Aspiring Educator Program. And basically what that is juniors and seniors that want to commit to becoming an educator. They kind of declare that early and we work with them to align their concurrent enrollment classes, whether it's child psychology or children's literature at Iowa Western. So, because a lot of our students take concurrent enrollment through Iowa Western, we might as well have them be taking education courses that are offered that we can get them in. And of course, we pay for those. And so aligning that, and then what that program does is that they do an interview in the spring of their senior year to stay committed to the RAY program. We have our first interview coming up Friday for our very first RAY candidate. So I'm excited about this. And then what they will do is we will commit to paying for their AA portion of their degree towards an education degree in elementary ed, special ed, secondary, whatever that might be. And they will continue to go to Iowa Western Community College full time, but they're committing to being an associate for us for the next 4 years in a paraprofessional capacity. And so for us, that's obviously primarily in our PK2 building, our 3-5 building. And so what that does is it fills a classified shortage area that we have, but also gets them fully ingratiated into education. I'd like to get a little bit more of that back built into their senior year so they get exposed a little bit earlier. And even if they're going to be a secondary math teacher, we're going to get them that experience in our elementaries where we have that desire and that need, because they're going to learn a lot about working with teachers, working as a team, and all the structures that associate with the job. It's not so much the age and the content of the students, that'll come. And then what we've worked out with Iowa Western is basically those MOUs with UNIs, Upper Iowa, Buena Vista, to have a fully online program where they can continue to be full-time associates and continue to take their coursing online or in the evening. And so then they will pick up that other half of that balance on them. So basically they're getting a degree while working full-time, 4 years at associate for us at half the cost. And so we have our first applicant in the program. We pitched it to parents and students this year. And so we hopefully will have at least one. And then, in 4 years, we get a pipeline of teachers coming back. We have first right of refusal to hire them if we have the opening. If not, we're happy to see a great RAM teacher end out into the workforce somewhere else. And that's the RAY program. And the C2C program, we have 5 teachers in that program right now that are paraprofessionals. And they're at different journeys. Some of them actually, one of them has a bachelor's degree, but in a different field of education. So they're on a different journey. We have some people that don't have an AA and they're on a different journey. And it's basically the TARPA program, but we're running it in-house on our own without any, subsidies or monies. We're actually committing to paying for their half of their portion. And then they pick up the other half. And it's oftentimes with those same partners. Upper Iowa, Graceland's been awesome to work with. We even have someone in Western Governors as well. And one of the things we're proud of is that in both programs, we were able to, UNI is most notably, they've been able to integrate the student teaching within the day or spread it out over 16 weeks, which has always been a hurdle to one of these programs because you'd have to work full time, make money, and then stop. And that wrecks the associate part of the position because it doesn't work like that, and also income. And so they were able to work on some job embedded credits and put that into place. And some of that's still being delineated out in the MOUs. But I'm really excited that that's really at the forefront of where we are in those programs. So for a district like us, as 153 certified teachers, having a couple in the RAY program, a couple in the C2C program, that's 7 or 8 possible candidates in the next 2 to 5 years all the time that are coming up. That's huge for us. I have to travel all across Missouri and Nebraska to find 5 or 6 people to apply for positions. So, I mean, that's a great opportunity. And one others I'd like to recommend and shout out that is more on the retention side of this spectrum, and that's our Glenwood U program. And that is where you can get a master's degree of curriculum and instruction in 6 different areas, from computer science to special education curriculum and instruction. And that is through a cooperative agreement we have with a great partner called Bloomboard. And they are a credentialing micro-badging type company that has now partnered with, we use Oklahoma Christian as the transcripting service in university, but you work through at your own pace a master's degree all through competency-based education, which is a great match for us because we're a standards reference grading school district. And I'm a big believer of we should do with our adults what we do with kids. So if we say competency is important and we value proficiency, it's nice to be able to partner with a company that does that, so that it's all submitted through portfolios. We don't write papers. We don't do those kinds of things. They have to film themselves, actually doing the practice. And we have 5 teachers in that program. And what's awesome about that program is they can finish it as fast as 18 to 24 months. And we're paying for 50% of that. We're subsidizing 50% of that. And they'll actually get a master's degree for $5,000 out of their own pocket. And so we have 5 teachers in year 1 of that program, and that's called Glenwood U through Bloomboard. They've been phenomenal to work with. And I always say they're like the one vendor that has just hung in there with me. I started talking to them in August of 2019, and all throughout the perils of the pandemic, they've stuck in there for little old Glenwood and still helped develop a great program. And they're still helping me do that. And I'm excited for our teachers. They're really being challenged in the program. And, they're no knock to our higher ed universities around here, but they're not responding to Blackboard posts. Respond one thing to what, Lisa said. It's really, film yourself doing this practice, and they're all kind of pass-fail credentials. So it's amazing to hear the work they're doing. So that's our Glenwood U program.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that. That sounds fantastic. And you're right. There's a way for retention, when you can support teachers in their growth and help a little bit on the financial side as well. That's fantastic.
For sure.
So, Chad, as we know, it's important to recognize our teaching staff for the work that they do supporting our students and families. You designed and implemented a District Teacher of the Year recognition program. Tell us more about that program.
Yeah, when I started here 4 years ago, I was as green could be. I had not been in a central office position, and I'm smart enough to know that you should lean into some things that you could actually pull off. And I had a previous career as an athletic director, and that's doing lots of senior nights and recognitions and Hall of Fames and all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, I don't feel competent on much of anything. I didn't know TLC from Ed Portal from anything. And I thought, we don't have a Teacher of the Year program. And I made a call up to Sioux Falls. I did a Google, and Sioux Falls School District had an awesome application online and everything. And I thought I could do that. That's one thing I could do. And so I kind of modeled it after them, and I pitched it to our foundation. Our superintendent said, we should pitch that to our foundation. They'd be great partners. And that was 4 years ago. And so our Glenwood Community Schools Foundation picked up the ball. They're like, this is great. We'd love to do this. And so I helped them develop a scoring rubric for their committee and some parameters. And I helped do the application and just kind of take care of the school side of things so that I could distribute it out to our staff and our community and things. And we started that 4 years ago. And we have 4 main buildings in our campus. So that we really try to solicit nominations from every building so that we can honor a finalist from every building. And then and the committee does all this. I don't do any of this. I just help coordinate it. And then what they did was they actually sought out a partner with our Farm Bureau to sponsor, so the nice plaques and things like that for our schools. And so John B. Gregory is our local Farm Bureau agent. His dad, John A. Gregory, was a longtime teacher in our district. And so they've named the award after him. And he gets to present it to them every year in honor of his father. So it's really, really cool. And some of our teachers who have been finalists have had John A. Gregory as a teacher years ago. So that's been really, really neat. We've done that for 4 years. We had to do it virtually. And that was really interesting. We actually went to their homes that spring, and live streamed it. And so that was really popular and surprised them, they got in with their families and communicated with them and stuff. And one of the things I like to do is share, if I can, I'll share with every single nomination, because we use like a Google form. Every teacher, I want them to see what people write about them. So it's parents, sometimes it's students that submit it. And whether or not they're identified as a finalist, it's awesome to get to share those things, and just priceless to share those things and see their face. And then in March on a Sunday afternoon, we have a nice ceremony for their families. And that has been so great. Anybody that wants to come can. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm the MC of it, and I get to read some cool backgrounds about them, and I read some of their nominations. And then, of course, the committee identifies with John B. Gregory, the overall winner. And then they get a traveling plaque for their school, and their families are there. They're either their children or their mom and dad. We've had some young finalists. Their parents were there. And so that was really cool. And I'm really proud of that. And it's not been as much me as it's been our foundation. They do all the great flowers and cookies and all that cool stuff that I'm not good at. That is not one of my strengths, is sort of that relational in Gallup's world, they call them blue, functions.
Yes.
But they are very good at that, and the live streaming and all that kind of stuff. It's just another great way to honor our teachers, and obviously all of them could be up for the award. And so it's been really neat. And what I'm really proud of is the committee's done a great job of not just selecting the teacher who's been here the longest. One of our finalists 2 years ago, I think, was a second or third year teacher who was just phenomenal. And that was so neat. And it was really, really neat just to see like his parents there, and this is someone that, we recruited out of college. And so that students and the families in our community have recognized how strong of a teacher he is. And so that was just seeing those moments. It's great. And, trying to get our branding and our social media up so that we get to share those with folks. We're going to have an end of year celebration ceremony and honor some of our retirees and stuff. And I'm going to make sure that those folks get honored again, have them stand up in front of our entire staff. So that's been something fun that we've been able to do with our foundation, and also working with our John B. Gregory Farm Bureau here in our community.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So, Chad, throughout many of your responses today, there's this thread, there's many different threads, but one of those is how you are involving your community.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about community involvement in the Innovation Center. I just heard you talking about community involvement through the foundation and other ways with the recognition program. So talk just briefly about the importance of community involvement and why it seems like, from my perspective here in this conversation, how strong it is there at Glenwood.
Well, we do have a great, strong community that supports our schools and is very invested in our schools. And we have a response, and things have changed and evolved so much that as school leaders, we have a responsibility to find avenues to invite people in our community that maybe their kids are grown up and they're out of school. And it was like yesterday they were at their volleyball game, and then now they're just like a grandparent in our community. And they're supportive and they come to homecoming games and everything, but they don't understand that we're trying to be innovative in financial technology or robotics or something like that. Has just blown their minds. And so for us in a community of our size, and very typical in Iowa, the great opportunities to shine a light is to not do a town hall and say, let me tell you everything about an innovation center, but rather both Devin and I try to do this, and I do it in my own ways because in some regard, because of the age of my own children, is utilize your community connections to celebrate the great things that you're doing and explain the things that we do in our school and why, and really shine a light. For me, being a member of our Kiwanis Club in the community has been really rewarding. Almost all the work we do in Kiwanis is to give back to students and kids. And so we've really done backpack programs, and we're funding a lot of computer science initiatives and pilots in our schools. And I bring our committee into our schools. They need to see how kindergartners use coding robots. And it's just blown their mind. And they tell people that stuff. And of course, we use social media and all that, just like everyone else. So I feel like, my participation in things I really value allows people to get to know me, but also through me, the passion that I have in the work that we do. And it's hopefully really authentic and maybe can fix some misconceptions or lack of information that community members might have as schools just evolve and change to meet the needs of our students. So whether that's youth sports, I have two fifth graders, I have twin fifth graders. So, we're in every which direction. I'm the biggest fan of swimming because they go to the same season at the same time. So that's been really good. Fall football and volleyball, not so much, but I'm working on that. But I serve on the board for our youth football organization, get to coach my son there. Being on the Kiwanis Club has been great because it's different people in the community I normally wouldn't cross paths with. I mean, a lot of those people have been around this community a long, long time. And they've been just great supporters of me and also the work of our school district. And then being a teammates mentor, we're the largest chapter of teammates school-based mentoring in the state of Iowa, and that's based out of Lincoln, Nebraska. And I get to be a mentor with a student that I've been with for 3 years. And so getting to give back to a student that really just needs another positive adult in our community. It's awesome. I get to see school from a different lens with him, and it's always a lot of fun. And then I've really enjoyed and had the opportunity to serve on the board of On With Life. On With Life is based out of Ankeny, but they have an inpatient center here in Glenwood, which unfortunately is closing. It's on the GRC campus. But being able to serve on that board allows me to understand just another subset of our community and its interaction. Those patients, their parents, are those employees from like an economic development standpoint. It's been really eye-opening as well. And so just kind of getting to be involved. It's a busy Google Calendar like everybody else in school leadership. So I don't know how many people go from like a third grade math curriculum meeting to a Kiwanis meeting, but I do. So it's kind of an interesting, I got a new administrative assistant and she's been training like on my calendar and things. She's like, man, you do a lot of random things in a day. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely do. I never really looked at it that way. So, but that's been, I would say like the connection in a community our size is to be able to help tell your story of your school. And it's just different avenues to do that. I'm not on those committees to do that, but that's been my learning of volunteering my time or being a part of those organizations, because that's what people talk about. You're waiting for the game to start. And they're like, so how's it going at the new playground or, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to share the great things, or, oh, my daughter had this teacher. She says great things about him. I'm like, she's fantastic. They have a great team, and I get to celebrate our people that way. So that's been the rewarding part beyond other reasons, but that's been the rewarding part.
Yeah. Well, Chad, I want to thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, and congratulations again. It's well-deserved for sure. So
well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Again, I'm tickled to do it. I would love to be able to have these conversations every week with other people and listen to them. And so that's why the podcast is a phenomenal idea. Love that. And just thanks for everyone out there that's always willing to help. It's one of the main reasons we came back to Iowa, is just that feeling of being supported, that everybody's got your back. Just shout outs to people that in Iowa that just embraced me in open arms. And they didn't know me from Adam. They do a similar position that I do. And I just send an email and say, what do you think about this? Or do you do this in your TLC program? And I could list off all the litany of the people at the DE that I constantly call and bug and say, Christy, I know I've asked you this question before about ISAS, but where do I click and what do I do? And they're just so awesome about it. And I think that's one of the things we have to celebrate in Iowa, is that we have a great network. SAI and I shared this with Tracy earlier, SAI has a lot to contribute to that, and should be very proud of that we really are just a big family. And I always feel that in August when I'm there at the conference. And so thank you for that support, Lisa, that you've given me as well, and the inspiration to continue to do the work.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
SAI's podcasts are intended to help you learn from and with your colleagues. We're excited for the upcoming annual conference, August 2nd and 3rd, with pre-conference on August 1st. Don't miss this additional opportunity to learn from both national thought leaders and practitioners offering promising practices. Registration is open on the events page of the SAI website. Be sure to join us for the next episode when we welcome the elementary, middle level, and secondary principals of the year.